Good morning, everyone. It is about 6:30 in the morning. The birds are all chirping and it is still relatively cool outside. So I wanted to get out and harvest and make some bouquets so that way they could condition while I started working, and then when I got off at lunch I could go and drop them off at the country store where they will be sold. So I thought it'd be fun to do a video, especially after visiting my friend Crane's garden where he grows a bunch of perennials, to make some bouquets that were basically all perennial focused. Now, the ingredients that I'm going to be using are flowers that are perennials or are self-seeded. So that means that I basically didn't have to do anything in terms of planting these last year. All of these plants that I'm going to be talking about were put in 2022, fall of 2022. So some of them I got a decent first flush, some of them I didn't, but I can tell you in second year I'm getting a really good flush. So we are going to go through each of the ingredients and then we're going to put together the bouquets. What we're looking at right now is second year Yarrow, and this Yarrow is bonkers. It is so amazing that I plan on aggressively dividing this and then putting them outside of this fence line over here where I can hopefully double, maybe even triple the amount of Yarrow that I have. So I want to show you a couple of things. This is what happens when you don't net Yarrow or corral it. There was actually a weed growing in the middle, but if you also don't aggressively cut back, I did cut back, but I think it was the weed over here. But if you don't aggressively cut back, the Yarrow and other perennials will actually tend to split. So I did try corralling last minute and some of these stems are wonky. So I'm actually going to use the less wonky ones for the retail bouquets at the country store, but I have about 50 stems pre-sold for the co-op next week, and I know that if I bring any more, they will get sold. So I'm trying to prioritize the best straight looking ones for the florist. Now, another thing to talk about here is this looks like that it's a bit of blooms. I have another patch that I'll show you down there, but Yarrow takes a while to mature. So for example, right now it's Friday, my co-op's on Wednesday for the florists. A bloom like this, I'm actually not confident if it would be ready by Wednesday. So there's obviously weather in the form of heat as well as day length that's going to impact this, but Yarrow as a whole takes a little bit of time to mature. So you want to apply the wiggle test with Yarrow. So for example, this one over here looks kind of mature, but if you do the test, like it's still very floppy. So you want to make sure that when you do the test, it looks more like this, where it's really not flopping at all at the top and the head is a bit more rigid, so it's moving with the stem when you move it. So that is always the test that I do when I harvest Yarrow, and if you don't do that, it will probably wilt in your bucket, so not something worth taking the chance on. This is my second patch over here, and I will be doing a separate video on Yarrow, specifically what second year Yarrow looks like. Here's a sneak peek. I mean, it is going really well, and I am really glad that I divided from this patch over here because you can see that the plants are taken off. These are looking really strong. You're not getting as many stems in the first flush, but still more than what I got when I got these started from seed. So always a better idea to divide from existing plants versus starting from seed from a production perspective. This here is what a second year sea holly plant looks like. That is one plant and it is bonkers. So let's count the number of stems. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the back. Now, one of the challenges that I'm seeing with this ridiculously producing sea holly is that some of the stems are ridiculously thick. So this is probably not something that is as usable in a bouquet. That being said, I've been selling it to florists, the entire stem for about $1.85 each, and they can use it for floristry work. The upside is that as I'm waiting for the whole plant to mature, we are now getting sufficient side shoots. Like this stem over here would be perfect in a bouquet if you look at that length. So you just need to give it a little bit of time. What ends up happening is the center flower over here will start turning blue, and then the bracts on the side are going to take a little bit more time. So you have a lot of time to actually harvest, assuming if you cut this one off when it turns brown. You can still use the side. So it's a very flexible plant. I think that this is a much better example of what the blue color is supposed to look like. And you can see that still the sides are a little bit more green. I've read that if you harvest more at the green stage, it doesn't stink as much. I'm not smelling anything. So to me, it's fine, but I know some people feel like it smells like poop. But if you harvest earlier, it smells less like poop. And supposedly once you put it into the cooler, the cool temperatures also neutralize the smell. So we've got the sea holly over here to cut from, and I've got about 30 stems pre-sold for next week. I think I'll have plenty, so I don't have to worry about that. But I will be cutting off the side over here to put into the country bouquets. Here we have my tiny, tiny foxglove patch, which is really no more than about 8 feet, and it has pumped out so many stems, especially because this is second year foxglove. I've gotten about, if I had to guess, 80 stems off of this one area. A single plant can produce so many. This is a really good example. This is just one plant. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this is not even the first flush. And what I find is that my foxglove can get tall to be around 3-4 feet. It's never going to be as tall as a high tunnel, but it is still more than plenty for bouquet work. And it actually is a lot easier using this for bouquet work because it is so petite. So I've got some of these darker pinks. This is my favorite. This is the Foxy Foxglove variety, by the way, but look at that color. That color is just so pretty. We've got some white back there. So we are also going to harvest this. And this is my only spike type of flower. So it's going to add a little bit more height to these bouquets. This here is not a perennial, but it is a very generous self-reseeder. So this is Nigella, or Love in a Mist. And last year what I did was I had probably about 1/5 of the plants that I have in this row, which I'll show you in a panned out shot. But I let the Nigella go to seed like this, and then I didn't do anything with it, and I let it basically self-reseed. So what that meant was that this bed did not get flipped in the fall. It got very weedy, and upon unweeding it, or upon weeding it in the fall, I then got these sprouts of the seedlings. I let them go, I thinned them, and then this is what they produced. Let me show you the whole row. So I'm standing at the end of the row, and if you look all the way up, you can see that there's a bunch of Nigella. I literally harvested about 7 bunches 2 days ago, and when I was done, it didn't even look like I made a dent here. So you can tell that Nigella is just a very, very generous type of flower that puts out a lot of stems. And I got lucky because we had a couple of buyers at the cooperative on Wednesday who needed Nigella for an event. So all 7 bunches that I brought to market floor sold. That's not always the case. But what I love about Nigella is that even though it has a short vase life, you can harvest during certain stages that will guarantee you a little bit of a longer vase life. So for example, this one's just starting to open up. That's a great example of having maximal vase life. If it's for an event, I want to make sure that this is not too separated. The petals are not too separated from the top because this is starting to form a seed pod. But this is a pretty good example of one that has opened recently that I would harvest. So then once it goes to seed pod, you can still sell the seed pod, even dry them. So this is a very versatile flower, as well as one that gives you a little bit more of wiggle room in case if you don't have time to harvest. But what I found is that my retail customers love this. They're always like, what is this? It is so whimsical. Is this even a flower? So I'm gonna harvest both the seed pods, like that one over there, as well as the flowers to use. And you probably saw, but I do want to point out that I have 2 types growing here. They're both white petaled, but some of them have a more blue or a purplish center, which forms seed pods like this. And then some of them have more of a green center here, which form seed pods like this. So you get a contrast here, which is really cool. Next, we've got my lilies that not only perennialized in this bed, but were lasagna planted with my tulips. So just less than 2 months ago, we had tulips coming out over here in this bed, and now we've got lilies that I've already been harvesting from. So I'm only going to be using my perennial lilies in this bouquet over here just to show you what it would be like to make a bouquet from flowers that you didn't have to actually plant over again. And lilies, for most of us, will actually perennialize. And let me show you what is a great testament of that. These here are crates of lilies that I left outside in the elements in New Jersey in zone 7A over the winter. And you can see they are putting on blooms. So these are awesome because they're actually coming back pretty strong. Now this is from a summer succession that I had. So when I cut them, there was still some time for them to regenerate. And I actually didn't leave that much on the stem. I probably left only this much on the stem for it to regenerate, and you can see that it's still doing well. On the other hand, we've got a crate over here that was similarly also overwintered, but the last of these were cut in October. So you can tell that they didn't get a chance to regenerate as much, but they're still putting up buds, and they're putting up either tiny 1 or 2 buds, which I actually find to be really easy to work with in bouquets. Sometimes you want massive lilies, and sometimes you just want something that's not as in your face, and these are really good for that. So I find that I can use them both, and sometimes they actually feel like different flowers because of the sheer size of the bloom heads. So we're gonna get to harvesting some of these. The orange ones I find always go first, as in they're ready first to harvest. But with one like this, I probably wouldn't harvest it till much later, because even if these blow out, I can wait for these to open. And this is why I love lilies so much, because you have so much flexibility, especially if there's multiple bloom heads. I have a lot of lilies, as you can tell. Now, these over here were all succession planted this year, but what I will be doing is taking the ones that I really like and setting those crates aside and trying to perennialize them for a second flush. So putting it out there, if you guys want a reliable focal for the rest of the season, I am selling lily bulbs. I'm sold out right now, but I have a couple of crates coming in over the next couple of weeks, and these should be really fast days to maturity. Like, we're talking about 60 or even under, because of how much day length we're getting right now and how hot it is. And then of course, if you plant them in the ground, you can certainly definitely perennialize them. And if you plant them in crates, if you're in my zone or above, you should also be able to perennialize them too. We've got this patch of feverfew behind me, which I cannot use. It has thrips. So last year I spotted my first thrips on feverfew, and so I've been diligently looking at these every single day. They're not there during the day, but at night they're very active. So obviously I am not going to cut my feverfew and give my customer thrips-filled feverfew. And from last year, I've learned that I have basically about a week to manage this. And by managing, I mean I'm going to rip these out. I can actually use the bed space, so it's totally fine. This was an experimental plot. Last year I had 70 of 3 feverfew varieties. I had to rip literally all of them out except for these. So these are actually perennialized feverfew from the ones that I cut all the way down basically to the ground, and then they came back. So you can see that feverfew will perennialize for me in the zone. For whatever reason, the thrips love my feverfew. I've read studies where people plant feverfew basically as a crop to help produce predators and attract predators that will eat thrips. And instead, I have thrips on the feverfew. So basically, this is unusable. Good to know I can grow it. It is what it is. I'm gonna manage it. I'm gonna get it out. Thrips life cycle is very short. So if you are seeing, thrips reproductive life cycle is very short. So if you are seeing thrips, you need to manage it, because when you don't manage it, they will start jumping to other crops. They can fly short distances, but they also get carried by the wind. And so when I saw my first thrips, it was about 2 days ago. So my #1 priority this weekend is to get rid of this patch. And then hopefully that will help manage the amount of thrips that I see elsewhere. I also know there are a bunch of people out there who think I'm bonkers for just ripping stuff out that has pests. I have a no spray mentality. It is just something that I value. I know that not everyone is aligned to that. Some of you guys are. And I think that when you have a no spray mentality, really the only other option you have is integrated pest management, or IPM. For me, when I thought about the crops that I was growing this year and the ones that were prone to thrips, basically feverfew as well as snapdragons, it did not make sense to me to employ a true IPM regiment where you're talking about bringing beneficial nematodes, mites, and just all of these things on a constant basis. The cost really does add up. Feverfew is a filler, right? Like, I'm not gonna go crazy over a filler. Snapdragons are a profitable crop, but they're not the most profitable. So as long as I can manage not having thrips on more profitable crops like lilies, dahlias, even some of my lisianthus, then I'm good. So what I will be doing is I will be doing beneficial nematode drenches on those crops probably in the next couple of weeks, because those are nowhere near blooming. So I want to make sure that I am managing the larva. But by the time they do bloom for me where I live, the thrips pressure starts to going down. I find that thrips pressure in New Jersey, where I am, is most high like in June, July, and then as the weather starts cooling down, we start getting a little bit more rainfall, then it starts getting naturally managed. I am having like flies and bugs all over me right now. But wait, there's more. So one of the things that we did starting last year and into spring this year was really now filling out our landscaping beds. We had a couple of construction projects last year that made it really difficult for us to do so, but this year we had some time, so I started investing in that. And I've been testing to see what does well out here and what doesn't with the deer. A lot of things that deer are not supposed to eat here, especially during fawning season. They've even been eating some of my mint, but I want to show you two more ingredients that I'm going to put into my bouquet that are perennials. This here is mountain mint, and I know that it's really weird to put this in your landscaping, but I actually have some stuff in the back where I know once I cut these will basically go down to the ground, but they are starting to flower. So I actually have some more in another area that have flowered a little bit more, and I'm cutting to see how they do. So far, my vase life tests at home are really, really good. So I'm just gonna be using these if they hold up in the next couple of hours. But I've got a few patches of this mountain mint. This was all put in last year and they started aggressively growing this year. So one nice thing about having something like mint in here is that it will choke out some of the more aggressive invasive weeds we have. So this entire place was covered with mugwort before, and I would rather have something like mountain mint versus mugwort cutting it. So we'll see what we do with this in the future, but for now I'm just thankful to have something to cut from. We also have a lavender plant here that was given to me by a neighbor who was redoing their landscaping and didn't want lavender. So I was like, of course I'll take it. So this is a great pop of purple, and I will also be harvesting a few of these to use in the bouquets. It is now just a little bit after noon, and of course I didn't get a chance to put bouquets together, which is totally fine. Life happens. Kids wake up earlier than expected. So we're gonna get to bouquet making right now, and as you can see, the stuff conditioned pretty well, including the mint. So we're gonna be using these. But before I start putting together bouquets, I'm gonna open up the lily coffers, because over the past few days I've been accumulating lily stems and taking those from the perennialized patches, aka the crates that overwintered, and we're going to be using them in those bouquets. My lily coffer is this free fridge that we got from a neighbor. We've got a bunch of lilies in here, but these are the ones that I had taken that were from the perennial bed. So I want to make sure these are perennial lilies and not the ones that I had harvested before. So we're just going to take out this bunch and then put them into the bucket. One shout out here are the rectangular buckets that work really, really well in a fridge space like this. As you can see, it really does maximize space. I have a video that I did last year on should you buy buckets or get the free one from the grocery store. And now I am team rectangular Procana buckets. Now, before I make the bouquets, I do want to talk a little bit about setup, including holding solution. So typically when I harvest, I do put floral holding solution into the bucket of water. This morning I didn't, just because I was in a rush, but also when I'm harvesting early in the morning and I'm only holding for a couple of hours, I'm okay with conditioning them in just regular cold water. But when I am preparing to then transfer the bucket to the country store where those blooms might be sitting there overnight, if they don't sell out, they do go into a refrigerator, I want to make sure that there's holding solution in the bucket. Now, just a very quick 101 on the difference between holding solution and flower food. They are different. Flower food has a higher concentration of sugar and carbohydrates to feed the blooms, and it is really meant for the customer to have in their vase when the flowers are already at the customer's end destination. When it comes to holding solution, this is less sugar, and there's more of a priority in terms of making sure there's not as much bacterial buildup in the water. So things like floral solution can be really good, especially if you have dirty stems. Yarrow is one of those dirty stems. If I had just a full bucket of yarrow and I was trying to hold it for a couple of days, I would actually put a CVBN tablet, which is basically a chlorine tablet, and that really makes sure that there's no bacterial buildup. So zinnias, sunflowers, I usually typically use a CVBN tablet when it is a full bucket's worth. So I already put some of this into the bucket, and what I did was I now have two buckets. I have a bucket over here for the new bouquets I'm going to make. This is going to be the water that goes into the buckets at the country store. This is my harvesting bucket with the original water. And of course, I have a bucket to trim the ends, and now I am ready to get to bouquet making. So not surprisingly, lilies will be the focal and the focus of the bouquets. I mentioned earlier that what I love about lilies is the fact that they have multiple buds, which gives you a lot of flexibility. And that's what I want to talk about here, because this one is pretty open. The other ones that are colored up are also going to open. So this will definitely open. This one should open. These two are questionable. But I mean, at this point, we're going to have at least 4 open, even if I snip this one off. And I will be snipping this one off because lilies do bruise very easily. Their petals come off in case of you accidentally, like crash it into something, or even in a bouquet sleeve. So I find that you might actually impact the perceived value of a bouquet negatively by keeping this in there. So I'm going to snip this off, and what's going to happen is some of the other blooms are going to naturally open up in the store over time. So people are still going to get an understanding for how this looks, but without potentially a negative perceived value because this one's bruised. And you can even see the fridge door kind of did a number on this petal over here. So I'm just going to snip it off. So I've got 2 bouquets that are finished in my hand. I've got another one in the bucket. And I want to talk a little bit about the evolution, the continued evolution of my bouquet making, because these are a lot bigger than what I would normally make them. And about a week and a half ago, I visited my friend Crane of Cranery Garden. So give his YouTube channel a watch if you haven't yet. He makes the most beautiful bouquets. We did a video, which is basically how to make a killer flower arrangement for $30, and the thumbnail is roast my bouquet. So we spent a lot of time around him giving me advice with designing. And I felt like not only did his design tips rub off a bit on me, but a little bit of his overstuffing that he's guilty of also rubbed off on me. But I did have this aha moment where I realized that because Crane is growing like 80% of his flowers as perennials, he obviously has a lot less labor when it comes to growing. Of course, he has to maintain those perennials, but for the most part, he doesn't have to do as much as we have to do. And we're talking about by multiples. So in other words, if you take out the labor cost of growing the flowers, in some ways it gives you permission to overstuff by a little bit. So each of these bouquets have 3 lilies that again are perennialized. Some of them have 2 foxglove, others have 3, 2 stems of mountain mint. And there's a bit more yarrow in all of these, but the yarrow heads are a little bit smaller. And I would say on average, each bouquet has about 3 to 4 Nigella. So all in all, you're looking at about 15 to 60 stems per bouquet, with 3 of them being the more expensive focal, which I would value each lily stem here around $4 to $5 retail. So you might say that this is not a profitable bouquet, but it is. Because again, the real labor that I had to make this was around assembling this and then bringing it to the country store. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like I have a little bit more permission to overstuff or make my bouquets beyond what they would normally be because these are perennials. And I did a whole video around what makes a market bouquet profitable. And I talked about this aha I had where if you just replaced a bouquet with perennial filler, what that could do with the profitability of your bouquet. This is next level. This is all perennial. And so if I were to calculate the time and the labor and just all that goes into making this bouquet would actually be more profitable than me growing something like Lisianthus, Snapdragon, and all those other annual types of flowers where I have to baby them for over a really, really long period of time and get to this ultimate point where I am making a bouquet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap these bouquets and then we're going to drop them off at the country store. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how it's going with the country store as I wrap. Let's talk a little bit about what I bring to the country store and the rationale behind it. So I'm only bringing 3 bouquets to the country store, and typically what happens is I will refresh the stock over the weekend. So today's a Friday. I normally actually try to bring these by Thursday. So I try to make the bouquets on Wednesday and have Eric bring them in on a Thursday morning since they close on Wednesday. And I just didn't get time to do this. So I bring 3 because 3 are, I might sell out all 3 and I might not. But what I don't want to do is have like 6 or 7 just sitting there, because at a certain point in the day, the sun actually hits the bouquets where it's located, and with how hot it is right now, things are just going to blow open. So one of the things that I've been doing with this store is really managing and working with them to make sure that I am bringing an appropriate amount. And what I do is I actually do consignment. So a lot of people will say, don't even work with a store if they're gonna, if they're not buying the flowers from you outright. I have a little bit of a different perspective. I just wanna make sure that this store is happy with having my flowers. This country store is about literally like 5 minutes away from me by car. It's a part of my running route when I run a 5K. It is that close to me. So for me, it's actually less about making sure that I sell out every single time. And it's more about making sure that I can continue to build this as a reliable outlet for myself. So that way I don't have to have people coming to my house. I don't have a farm stand. I don't plan on having one, and I have people who come up to pick CSA bouquets, but even then I kind of want to transfer everyone to this country store. So I want them to have what we call with them, what's in it for me. So I give them a cut. I give them a 20% cut, and then I also will basically eat up the cost of any unsold bouquet. So that basically means that I need to make sure I know that the amount that I bring is going to be likely to sell. So if I bring 3 today, and then I bring another 3 tomorrow, they're always going to look fresh. And then even when they do sell, customers who come see, oh, like the flowers are out, they're moving, right? So I want to also have this perception that the flowers are moving. So in a given weekend, I might only be selling like 6 bouquets, but it's 6 bouquets that is really, for me, just the foundational piece of building something bigger where hopefully in the future I will have more traffic. Now, again, retail is not my main sales outlet. My main sales outlet is actually selling to florists. So I'm trying to build a retail outlet that involves as little work from me as possible. I still have a CSA. I'm really limiting the number of CSA slots, and it's a very different CSA. I'm actually doing a premium vase arrangement CSA because one of the things I'm trying to do this year is get a lot better at arranging. So it was kind of a win-win for me in the sense that, hey, I'm going to deal with the administrative burden of having a CSA, but I'm also going to get something out of it. I'm going to learn how to arrange. So I basically created a once a month for 4 total months. So 4 total arrangements of a vase arrangement, premium vase arrangement, and that will allow me to work on the skill of designing. So I put my business card on here, and then afterwards we're actually going to print out stickers that say "Do not eat, keep away from pets," just to make sure that people understand the lilies are toxic, as well as the foxglove. So I'm gonna finish that up and we're gonna go print the labels. Here are the stickers, and I'm just gonna put them on the bouquets. I know I'm gonna get questions about this. This is a Rollo printer that I have. There are other printers out there. If you wanna learn more, I'm gonna talk about this in my next newsletter. It's completely free. Link is below if you want to sign up. I am now back from the country store, basically taking stock of what needs to be done this weekend in the field. But one thing I do want to mention about the country store, and just when you partner with a business, I think it's really important to partner with someone who shares the same values as you. So I am particularly picky about who I work with. I want to make sure that their brand values and just their mission aligns with mine. What I love about this country store is that they have a huge investment in children and education. They do a lot of tours as well as just educational things. Things from just like really small kids having story time to a little bit older kids touring the farm and understanding what it's like to be a little bit more connected with the outdoors. And that is something that I definitely want to do a little bit more in the future. So I love the fact that my flowers are there supporting a business in that cause. And I also actually like the fact that I am helping build traffic and diverting traffic to their store for people who normally may not actually go to that store. So as you can probably tell from the volume, that this is not a huge type of traffic type of store. Of course they get traffic, but when I am selling flowers, I am actually helping promote their store by driving traffic that would otherwise come to me and having them go to the country store. So the goal is to develop a greater, I guess, footprint that goes over there during the real season, and then off season when that country store is closed, that I would actually have people reaching out to me and being interested in my winter tulip subscription. So the winter tulip subscription is my main retail flower offering. Everything that I do during the season is actually trying to help further promote that. So whether that means getting people aware that I am a flower farm that exists and letting them know that I have winter tulips so that they're ready for that when the time comes, or to give people their flower fix for those who want flowers all season around. So that's why I still have a little bit of a retail outlet, even though for the most part, I would like to shift primarily to wholesale during the growing season. But that's it for now. As usual, let me know if you have questions in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.